One job that museum registrars and other collections managers have is creating accession records for new objects. Part of creating accession records are making object reports and condition reports. The two are similar but different. Object reports detail all of the physical descriptions of the object and are used so that someone looking through the record can find the object without having a picture of it. Ideally, there would also be a picture attached to the object, but in case they get separate or connected to the report, but in case they get separated, someone can use the description to find the exact object. Condition reports, on the other hand, are used to trace the physical deterioration of the object over time. Ideally, all objects in a museum would be in excellent condition and would stay that way. However, the reality is that objects break down over time, and condition reports are a way to see what has changed and what repairs have been made. I'm going to show you how I would do an object and condition report for this engineering textbook. So the first thing you're going to want to do is say what materials this is made out of. This book is made out of cardboard on the cover and paper on the inside. Object reports also contain a very brief condition report, and by brief I mean one or two words describing the overall condition of the object. In this case, this object is in very poor condition, which is about as low as it can go and remain in the collection. Another thing to include is the accession number. Accession numbers are often written on artifacts in a place that's inconspicuous. In a book, that's fairly simple because you can do it on the inside. So in this case, I've written the acquisition number 2010-0101, the first object collected in 2010 and it's part of the first group. I wrote it on the inside cover so that it's easily accessible. You also want to include the date of acquisition, the date that the museum acquired the object. In this case, January 15th, 2010. You also want to include a short object name, and this object name comes out of the museum lexicon, which you can read more about in the learning module. In this case, the short object name would be textbook, engineering. Next is including a description. The idea of the description is once again that someone can read your description of the object and be able to find it. So in this case, this is an engineering textbook that was published in 2003. It has a green and blue cover. It is extensively damaged and repaired with duct tape along the spine, which you can easily see. The front reads, "The most comprehensive resource available for the environmental PE exam, Environmental Engineering Reference Manual, Michael R. Lindberg, PE." And there are 32 colored reference tabs attached to interior pages, which you can find here. And also I would include the ISBN number, which you can find on the back of the book. If this was a report that I was doing for a museum to include in the catalog, I would go into more depth and say what is written on each of these 32 tabs and what page they're attached to. But for our purposes, this is enough. Object reports also contain the dimensions of the object. When you do dimensions, you want to go from extremes. So, in this case, the dimensions are, we want to start from the very top, you go down to the bottom, make sure we're going in a straight line. In this case, it's 11 1/4 inch by 8 3/4 inch by 2 inches. So the 2 inches would be here. The reason that you need to include the object's dimensions are so that when it comes to storage, the collections team can figure out the best place to properly store it. I also want to include the weight. Weight is more important for really large objects than for very small objects. This is because if you have, let's say, a scholar rock that weighs about 500 pounds, you need to know how much it weighs so that you can store it properly. A 500-pound rock would be stored on the floor. A 2.5-pound textbook could be stored on a top shelf. You also want to include the manufacturer if it's known. In this case, it's Professional Publications Publishing. And you also want to include the place of creation, in this case, Belmont, California. If there's ever any information that's not known, you just leave it blank. Another thing to include are index terms. Index terms are basically like tags on a blog post. It's so that when someone is searching the collection, let's say in this case, they could type in the word engineering, environmental engineering, professional engineering examination, and this would pop up. Index terms are often determined by the museum, and different museums use different phrases and terms for things. The object report also needs to include the location where it's stored. So let's say in this case it's stored on shelf 5, box 2, which in reality it's stored on the 5th shelf of my bookcase. And the exhibition history, how often it's been displayed and where. In this case, it's never been on exhibit. And this is so you can track how often it's been taken out of storage and put on display, and therefore exposed to light and new environmental factors. Now, condition reports, like I said, are a little bit different. It's a way to track the conservation of the piece over time. Condition reports are often done when an object is leaving the museum or has just come into the museum. Frequently, they're done for traveling exhibitions. So when at the Pink Palace, when we have objects come in from the Field Museum in Chicago and we borrow them for an exhibit about Plains Indians, they condition report the objects before they leave the field, and we condition report them again when they get to Memphis. When they leave, we condition report them in Memphis, and they are condition reported again in Chicago. It's partially done for insurance reasons, excuse me, and partially done to track and see if damage occurred, where, and when. In this case, like I said, this is in very poor condition. Very poor condition is at the bottom of the scale. With a condition report, you want to describe every flaw that there is on the piece and where it's located. So this is where, once again, you need a tape measure to really be able to do this properly. So, in this case, there is a previous repair with duct tape and cardboard along the spine. This is easy to see. You can see the duct tape. The cardboard is a little more difficult to find. You have to look up inside of it. I know it's there because I'm the one who repaired it. On the front, there are slight surface scratches throughout, which you're not going to be able to see on this camera because the dimension, it's not a good enough camera. But there are very slight scratches everywhere. If there's a problem with the artifact that is all over it, you can use words like throughout. Let's see. There is a 1-inch scuff mark 3/4 of an inch from the proper right corner. So in this case, this is right here. So you can barely see it on there. So review on the learning module the difference between proper left and proper right, because it's a little bit difficult to show you that on the webcam. But, so the scuff mark is 1 inch long, which you can see, hopefully. Here's a scuff mark. It's 1 inch long. I measure from the top, which is 3/4 of an inch down, and we also measure from the side, which is a 1/2 inch in. There's also an ink mark on the proper right side, 4 inches up from the bottom, which is over here. On the reverse, so this was all on the front. So on the reverse, which should be on the back, there is a 1/2 of an inch gouge in the cover, 1.5 inches down from the proper right corner, which is right here. Let's see, and the bottom right corner has been chewed off, possibly by a dog. And the binding is loose throughout, which you can tell if you're flipping through here. When you look at it, the binding is coming loose. I'm going to go back for just a second. When there is something like this, where there's obvious loss, obvious damage, if you know what caused the damage, you say so. So if you know that this was caused by Dermestes beetles, you would say bottom right corner has been destroyed by Dermestes beetles. If you're not sure but you have a very good idea, you can say it's been chewed off possibly by a dog. In this case, it was probably chewed off by the dog, but I did not catch him in the act. So that is the difference between object reports and condition reports. In the discussion forum for this week, one of your options is to do a condition report of an object in your home. If you do so, follow the guidelines that I laid out here, and please let me know if you have any questions. You need to make sure that when you do a report that you have a tape measure handy. You can use a tape measure like this. You can use a soft fabric tape measure. And you want to be careful to make sure that someone who is looking at the object for the very first time can read your report and find all of the flaws that you're mentioning.